So last summer, I went to a big conference for work, and pretty much everyone ended up in tears. I don't think most of us were surprised by this. It was a behavioral health conference, and most of what we were hearing about was people's individual experiences with mental health, addiction, and family violence. One of the things that really struck me, though, was the fact that almost every panel, every discussion, every speaker had the same positive undercurrent. That message was that human connection is the key. More than one person on that stage that week said, "Connection is what saved me." We hear a lot about what creates disconnection and distance in our world today. We hear about ubiquitous smartphones, a divisive political climate, and for most of us, overscheduled lives. We also, though, hear about those times, disasters and tragedies, when people come together, look out for each other, take risks for strangers. It shouldn't take a disaster. Disaster does have a way of catalyzing our individual and our community bonds. Thankfully, though, few of us will ever have the opportunity to respond so courageously in an extreme situation. Every single one of us, though, has a daily opportunity, probably many, to do things somewhere in that middle area between isolation and heroics. Things that build community, things that build relationships, and things that create connection. I think we all know good relationships are good for us. But what we really need to think about is the fact that they're more than just a feel-good idea. People who are lonely have a much higher risk of things like heart disease, depression, anxiety, and dementia. Isolation actually has a bigger impact on our health than even obesity. One of the most striking ways I've heard about, a way to think about our weak social connections, is that people who have weak social connections typically have a lifespan that's shorter by the equivalent of about someone who smokes 15 cigarettes a day. So even if you're not struggling with mental illness or some kind of a catastrophic event, connectedness can save your life. We're not just talking about personal health, though. In the Soul of the Community Project, which was a study done by the Gallup Polling Organization and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, they looked at 26 cities and towns across the United States, and they really just wanted to know what makes people feel attached to their communities. And they also wanted to know, does that attachment have any bearing on the economic well-being of those communities? So for 3 years, every single year, they interviewed about 14,000 people across the country. They asked them about the things that we think of as being important to a community: safety, education, leadership, and the economy. They asked them about 10 different types of questions. And in every single city and town across America that they studied, the top 3 things that people said made them feel attached to their community were the same. They were aesthetics, they were social offerings, and they were feelings of openness or welcomeness in that community. Those are things that do not feel insurmountable. People valued physical beauty and green outdoor spaces. They valued opportunities for social interaction and citizen caring. And they valued a community that is welcoming to new and different kinds of people. I can't imagine anyone thought safe streets and good schools are not important. But when it comes to what really makes people feel like their community is their own, like they are attached to the place where they live, are the things that we usually think of as nice extras. Interestingly, in those communities with the highest levels of attachment, those were also the communities with the highest rates of GDP growth. Right now, however, we are in the midst of what some people are calling a loneliness epidemic. Depending on what study you look at, somewhere between 1/3 to more than 1/2 of Americans report feeling lonely much of the time. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the former Surgeon General of the United States, has talked about this in the terms of a public health crisis. He told the Washington Post, "Our social connections are largely influenced by the institutions and settings where we spend the majority of our time." That means we need to listen to what the people told the Gallup organization and the Knight Foundation. We need parks and libraries, vibrant downtowns, and public spaces where people feel safe and that feel inviting to them. We need events and gatherings and community spaces where things happen, where connections happen. We need places where all people feel welcome and where they can afford to be. And we just need to do the small things. We should check in on that elderly neighbor down the street. We should invite a coworker that we don't know so well to sit with us at lunch. And we all need to call our moms often. These connections are not just nice to have. It's about our personal health, and it's about our community's health. They depend on it. So in this era of social media, ugly politics, and crammed calendars, true connection does sometimes feel elusive. But the research tells us that the quality of our connections is much more important than the quantity. And it is necessary for us to be healthy people in healthy communities. When it comes to what is wrong in the places where we live, we must be creators. We must create the opportunities to create the connections that create a community, because connection is the cure. Thank you.